I was recently watching it's one of the Insidious films. I think it was the third one, and the characters were watching a film, and on the TV, whatever, and it so happened to be Carnival of Souls, which is like 1962. There was also on the next film a trailer for another film because all the Insidious films have a lot of trailers on them. They had someone watching this film. I'm not just here to brag about my Criterion releases. My point is the fact that there are two, one at least very iconic, one mildly iconic, Carnival of Souls, films, horror films, that are visually shown in these two films. I know that Night of the Living Dead is showcased in a lot of films, basically post, I don't know, the early 2000s, which, in this case, post 2010, realistically, a lot of examples I can think of is then, and I think that's probably because they'd hit the 50-year mark. I don't know what it is exactly, but there's a term. It's like with music when it's royalty free. I think I wrote it down. Public domain. The Thing from Another World is another one of those as well, where a film has been around long enough that it's now been put in the public domain so that anyone can use footage from it. Basically, it's free. You can upload it to YouTube for free because it's public domain, Much like the character of Mickey Mouse is this year, public domain. Winnie the Pooh, also public domain. And the interesting thing is that it's kind of a cliche now, in a way. I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but I've seen it in a good catalogue of horror films. You can even watch it from the original Halloween film, the John Carpenter film from, 1978. They're watching The Thing from Another World because it's broadcast on TV. Cut to Halloween ends, 40 years later? And they're showing The Thing, the John Carpenter film, on the TV. Not to say that that's in public domain, but that's more or less just for the reference. But also because I think it's also a universe. Halloween is not universal, is it? I really have no idea. I think it is. I don't know. It's under Blumhouse, so what does it really matter anymore? It's just a thing where I think, again, the whole cliche element that at least I'm thinking of it as a cliche now, where if you're an indie or low budget horror film and you want to show that you really love horror, but you want to be kind of subtle about it, so you show your horror roots by emphasizing the horror greats. So you show Night of the Living Dead, or if you want to be really creative, Carnival of Souls. The thing is, of course, most of these are just for the visual reference. Look, it's that other film. Remember that one? Or, hey, look, I'm a writer-director. It's also a horror nerd because I've also seen this classic horror film. If you want to go, I guess, with Carnival of Souls, and I feel like that would be the more obscure element, especially because when I pointed out to Noah, I'm like, oh, look, they're watching Carnival of Souls. He's like, how do you know that? I'm like, well, I've seen it. It's like my favorite Criterion release, second favorite behind House, but it was one of my first ever Criterion releases, and I was like, oh my god, this looks amazing, and it's a crazy ass film, and it's just one of those things where it's like selectively choosing music in movies, which can be an off and off topic when it comes to the needle drops, the whole idea of putting in a pop song in a movie to make it maybe the scene catchier or whatever you're doing the Suicide Squad route of just slamming in a bunch of pop songs because you can. Sometimes they have some vague reference, like when they use Spirit in the Sky because they're in helicopters, and then of course you would contrast that to a modern standpoint with the Guardians of the Galaxy films and how they actually use these songs thematically. They use it for character, but then they also use it for fun as well, depending on what the stance is of the song usually. They're used for thematic reason, which is great, That's the best form of a needle drop, wherever you're going for a really iconic, I need an iconic song that fits with the current modern day standards of music and pop culture. Let's put it in here, it'll be great, it'll really work with this scene. usually I would hope that they would have scripted that beforehand. Hey, we're going to have this scene, we're going to shoot it like this, it's going to be like this. Not in a Baby Driver kind of way, but more of a Booksmart kind of way, where you have that song that happens like near the end of the film because they're in a fast car, and it's a good song that works at that time because it makes it sound cooler, but also the song, I'm pretty sure thematically, is about people kind of being like giving the finger to like the status quo and whatnot. So thematically it kind of still works. I was going to say that was just a random song they use and it happened to be really cool. No, I'm probably thinking of there's a lot of other different films that do that. But in terms of movies, that's a different kind of avenue where you want to use and it's usually black and white. It's usually a black and white horror film to make it look old, but then to be also, oh look, I'm edgy with my old horror references. But again, you look at a lot of low budget horror films from the past 15 years, from like Insidious onwards, and a lot of them reference that film. The original Terrifier was it Terrifier? I'm pretty sure it's Terrifier. It's either Terrifier or it's All Hallows Eve. One of the two of them references Night of the Living Dead. Like visually, they're what it's just like on TV or whatever. And I think it's All Hallows Eve. I don't think it's the original. I don't think it's Terrifier. I'm pretty sure it's the All Hallows Eve because they end up watching a videotape. But initially they're watching Night of the Living Dead. I don't really have a disdain for this. Like, it's cheap, it's easy to use. I feel like there's a kind of pretentious nature to it. Usually it's just the factor of, hey, we want them to be watching a horror film, this one's in the public domain, it's iconic, we can use it. It's usually always the exact same scene, either they're coming to get you, Barbara, or the zombies are attacking. It's usually one of the two scenes, unless they really want to go for a thematic thing and they use the last scene of the movie. It's like one of those three, two iconic scenes or the last scene, which is still iconic but thematically. So that's fine, I guess. It's just it's just in contrast to the needle drop, most of this stuff isn't thematic, because you want to use everything to a degree that amplifies the essence of the movie, if you really want to. Unless you're a Marvel movie that just goes for references. Is there much essence in that? I don't know. Maybe it depends on who you're looking at. Like all those thousands of YouTube channels are like, here's 1,000 references in the Black Widow movie. Did you see them all? Because I did. Because I have no life. And I saw this movie 17 times in cinema. So imagine sitting down in the cinema just to be like, that's a reference. That's a reference. That's a reference. I imagine people do that. I imagine those channels actually do that. They sit down, they do that. And mind you, I used to enjoy that kind of content on the YouTubes because I used to watch those movies and I used to want to know what the references were. I don't give a shit anymore. My time for that is past. But of course, I will still see a movie and I will still see that it's doing a reference and I'll be like, hey, that's a reference. Usually, of course, it's an actual, like, shot-by-shot kind of comparison thing, like in Jordan Peele's Nope with the Akira slide. Stuff like that, where it's like, it's a visual reference, it's like, it's subtle, they're not like calling out to it, because it's like, it's a thing that a character does, but it's not like someone else is behind the camera or like to the side being like, hey, that was like that from that movie. Like, they're not doing that. They're not being like over the top about it. Those are usually the better references, where they're visually referencing an earlier film that the filmmaker really likes. And sometimes it's just because it's cool. That's fine. I don't mind it. I don't even have much of a gripe when they just point it out, because they can, Like, movies are constantly riffing on each other anyway, so I guess we're getting to the point now where we can just show other movies in our movie and be like, hey, I was able to use that movie in my movie because it's in the public domain, not because it has any relevance to do with like thematic stuff or anything. It's just, oh, it's a horror movie and I'm making a horror movie and it's free. I can use it because I like horror movies, and that's a horror movie. Like, that's all I can think of when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like, it kind of takes me out of it in a way where it's like, because the thing is, it's not a background thing. These are usually like you're watching someone watching a TV and they're just watching the movie. It's not like in Halloween 3 where the character goes to a bar and on the TV it's like, this Halloween night, watch the original Michael Myers film, Halloween, and then you get the Silver Shamrock commercial where it says, oh, stay tuned after the movie, kids, for the big giveaway. And I'm like, my God, kids are watching Halloween and then they get killed? Oh my God. What a crazy night. But still, that's like a different kind of thing where it's like that's a background thing, but it's still there. It's showing how in universe Halloween and Michael Myers are a thing. They're in the universe, but as a movie, because it's trying for an anthology thing. So whenever people say that Michael Myers isn't in the movie, I say you're wrong. But at the same time, they're also going for, the point of the Silver Shamrock commercials, it's subtly there in the background to emphasize, something big's going to happen, and we're leading narratively towards that point anyway, that something big is going to happen. It has to do with Silver Shamrock. Actually, I think that's pretty early in the film anyway, but it's like, it's still there. Like, it's foreshadowing, kind of. And that's just like a fun thing, because they can reference the original Halloween because it's the people who made the original Halloween. And that's just a fun little reference, but also it works in universe because it's set on Halloween. It's leading up to Halloween night. It's again got the Silver Shamrock commercial right afterwards. It all works. Like something again like Halloween Ends referencing The Thing. That's fine because they're watching a horror movie and whatever. But again, that's more on the nose where they're sitting down and watching a horror movie and it's like, oh, hey, look, they're watching The Thing. That's another John Carpenter movie. He did the original Thing, like the original Halloween film, whatever, yada, yada, yada. All that kind of meta bullshit that you want to dive into. Does that detract from the scene? Kind of, but it's also less of the, John Carpenter directed it, and I feel like most obviously it's just a reference to the original Halloween film and how in that they were watching The Thing from another world, which of course was remade into The Thing pretty clearly. So they're not exactly, that's not exactly the public domain thing, but it's still the reference, the horror movie reference in a horror movie. That's a very specific look. They're watching a movie. It's mostly, again, either the studio has the filmmaker has the rights to the movie because it's in the same label like Universal, whatever, and they, are able to get the print. They're able to show 5-10 seconds, a minute of this movie because the people who are making the movie own the movie. It's not hard. That's usually how it works, to avoid any kind of copyright stuff. They will, of course, still credit footage from this movie in the credits, because why not? I mean, you kind of have to some degree. It's like decent bibliography, you can't not reference what your other texts are, But then in this one, of course, it's just, in the All Hallows Eve, it's just, look at that, it's that movie, because it's royalty free, we can use it, it's in the public domain. I don't know if it's royalty free, I think it's just public domain. I'm pretty sure there's a distinct difference between one and the other. I don't know many other films that are like that. I think most of them would be I feel like Wizard of Oz would be up there as well. I don't know how long it takes for a movie to be in the public domain. I feel like I should have done research on that. How long does it take for a movie to be in public domain? In order to establish if a work is in the public domain, you should ask yourself 2 questions. Who created the work? When did the creator die? If the creator died more than 70 years ago, his or her work should be in the public domain and can be used in the creation of new work. Failure to renew after 28 years, a movie or TV show was made in the... What the fuck? Failure to renew 28 years after a movie or TV show was made in the main... reason that American films made before 1964 are currently in the public domain. In 1966, Congress prepared a new copyright law that extended protection to 75 years from the release date. Interesting. Given how, again, 75 years from release date and, Night of the Living Dead isn't 70 years old, so... Oh, Quora. Let's see what that website says. How many years for a film to go in the public domain, and when they do the studios have to release all the films in their vaults to the general public? Copyright for corporate made creative works like movies last 95 years in most countries. Anything before 1924 is in public domain. So there's a lot of silent films you'll see in the public domain as well that'll be shown in like that's like an obscure reference, but nobody's gonna get that. Like if you're just randomly showing like the original Hunchback from Notre Dame, it's like why? Like this is really necessary. I mean, that's when you want to go hardcore thematic stuff, but also because it's cheap. So which is good since historians estimate 90% of black and white silent films have forever been lost to time. The film stock was very volatile. Few kept prints once a movie was no longer shown in theaters. From then until about 1970, films had a 28-year copyright term that could be renewed once for another 28 years. However, many made before 1950 were not renewed because they were thought to have no value, and about 50% of those films disappeared due to neglect. Night of the Living Dead entered the public domain in the United States because the original theatrical distributor, the Walter Reed Organization, failed to place copyright indication on the prints. Due to an error when titling the original film, it entered the public domain upon release, resulting in numerous adaptations, remakes, and a lasting legacy in the horror genre. An official remake written by Romero and directed by Tom Savini was released in 1990. This is according to the Wikipedia article. Anyway, look, the point is, it is in public domain. Whether or not it's clearly it's just a thing of a legality. Anyway. What are your thoughts? Have you noticed a lot of films like that, especially of current years? Have you noticed trends like that? I think Night of the Living Dead is the most obvious and blatant example, mostly because there are so many remakes and recreations and sequels. Like, you don't exactly need a sequel to be from the same public domain, like from the copyright of the first film. Like, take the Fast and Furious film, for example, the Vin Diesel movie. They could never make a direct sequel, as in the Fast and Furious 2, because the rights were owned by, and the rights are owned by Roger Corman, or I'm pretty sure it's Roger Corman, because he made a film called The Fast and the Furious in like the 50s. So they were able to make a remake, but not able to make sequels, otherwise they'd have to give him money. So hence why all the titles are so crazy. Anyway, yeah, let me know if you've seen any other films that are like that, and if it's kind of been a bother at all. Again, like, the film's blatantly like, look, old horror movie, now watch my horror movie, haha. Again, that's my only complaint, that it just seems a bit pretentious in a way. Like, I can understand the fact that it's cheap, you can do it, why not? But it's also like, make it a background thing, or try to use it thematically. One of the two. Again, same with the needle drop. Try to use it either thematically or as a background thing. But usually it's a big, loud pop song because it's popular. Whoop-de-doo. Goodbye.